I feel like watches are the flexiest object you could own. And I even think that watches are more of a flex than women buy insane cleef high jewelry, right? Because it's this thing of, I'm going to buy this watch. And most of the time, when you're buying a watch that's a Rolex or Patek or AP or whatever, you want people to know that your watch is a Rolex or an AP. It's the most outwardly obvious, I think, you can be next to logos, right? Watches are jewelry with logos, period.
Welcome back to The Materialist. I am Mark Bridge, the founder and CEO of At Present, Matchmaker to Extraordinary Jewelry, and I am your host. I have the pleasure of sitting with Malaika Crawford of watch and style and fashion fame, currently the editorial director for the Hodinkee magazine, and has worn many hats, many objects of adornment, as we will get into during this conversation. Are you surprised an intro to you at this point in your life starts with watches?
It's such a weird place to be, but it makes a lot of sense given the choices I've made over the past 5 years. Yeah, I still see colleagues from past lives. Last night, I bumped into the art director of Interview magazine, who I used to work with closely when I worked there. And everybody's always like, so watches, what's that about? But I'm deeply entrenched at this point, yeah.
Where were you before, and how did you find your way into this peculiar world?
So I started off my New York career. I'd say the real beginning of it was as Mel Ottenberg's first assistant. I probably started around end of 2015, back in the Rihanna heyday of Mel's career. And I did that for 4 years. It was
For the pop-up video here, for those who don't know, that's a big deal. Tell us why.
Oh my God. I mean, where do I start? Great training, amazing experience, probably no sleep, lots of schlepping, but we were doing for the Met Gala and music videos, and it was just the most insane thing to find yourself doing as like a young 20-something English girl now living in New York and coming to set with 50 pairs of Manolo Blahniks all of a sudden and having to make all this custom stuff. And it was just the most difficult, time-consuming, labor-intensive, but magical period of my life, I would say. But what a place to be, right? So I worked with Mel for 4 years, and part of that time was when he took over as creative director of Interview magazine in 2018. He's now editor-in-chief, but once he got that role, I started doing fashion for the magazine as well as a fashion editor. And so that was kind of like the birth of my own styling career. Took a pause from Interview and was doing freelance. Then the pandemic hit.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, why does that feel like yesterday? I mean, it was 6 years ago, which is crazy. Pandemic hit, sat around. What was I doing? I was up in Vermont, really in the middle of nowhere, meditating / crying / panicking, freaking out. You can imagine as a stylist, you can't go to set. What do you do? Does this mean it's the end of your career?
And nobody was buying clothes. That was not a thing other than Lulu's.
People were buying stuff, but yeah, it was very much, I don't know, sweatpants or whatever, cashmere socks. But it felt very existential career-wise. This is going to sound crazy, and I can't believe I'm telling you this story, and I think I've told a few people, but it really comes down to this Deepak Chopra 21 Days of Abundance meditation that I was doing. And there's one day in the program where it's do this meditation and look for a sign. And I swear to God.
That was your Deepak Chopra voice?
Well, I'm not going to do my Deepak Chopra
Probably
voice
better to
live
avoid that.
on
Okay,
air.
got it.
I do a great one. Anyway, so I'm doing my
Subscribe for behind the scenes content.
Yeah, exactly. Like and subscribe. I was doing my little Deepak Chopra meditation overlooking the beautiful view in northern Vermont. And it was like, look for a sign, it will appear. And my friend Holly texted me saying, hey, I'm looking for a lady's, I think she called it just a lady's yellow gold Rolex. Can you help me? And I was like, shit. Like, I've always really been into watches and jewelry. I've been doing a lot of research over the pandemic. And for some reason, it just stuck with me, right? And that's when I sort of stumbled upon Hodinkee, got sucked into this weird thing of watch news and articles online.
Why did your friend think that you could find this?
Because I'd been working with Mel and Ree, and I was
Because you were sourcing things.
People have always known I've been very good at sourcing, and I was very good at sourcing jewelry. And it was always, you'd go to a shoot and you'd show up with all this stuff and people would want to buy it, right? So initially I was, oh, maybe I should do that for a living. And I was sort of like the little accessories queen, right? So she's like, can you find me a Rolex? And I'm like, okay. So I start investigating, reading stuff online, kind of put it to the back of my mind and focus more on jewelry. Then I go and work for my friend Tom Bettridge, who's now at ID, who was at High Snobiety at the time, and was, hey, what about watches? And I was, oh, I don't know. I prefer to do jewelry and watches. And it was really Tom that pushed me to do the watch thing more. And I guess I just really fell into it. And then before I knew it, people at Hodinkee were knocking on my door and they were going incessantly trying to get me to say yes. Because at first I was absolutely not, why would you hire me? I have nothing to do with your nerdy zone.
Why did they want you? What were they looking at and saying, yeah, her?
At the time, that sort of, Hodinkee's had sort of a few different eras. And at that time, the editorial team was run by this man, Nick Marino, who's now a very good friend of mine, who is actually the global head of content. He has a very fancy job now at Sotheby's. But at the time, he was running the edit team at Hodinkee, and he really wanted to expand the team and the audience. And there was this real try to, I don't want to say democratize the watch space, but they were just expanding what Hodinkee could be.
For those who don't know Hodinkee,
yeah,
give us the overview of where did this come from? What did it grow into? And then we'll get, as the conversation progresses, to what it is now.
Hodinkee is this special place that is really just the go-to website for watch media, probably, I would say globally, at least in the US for sure. It's unique in that it really was the first of its kind to bring traditional watch media coverage to an online audience that wasn't by way of watch blogs or forums or whatever those weird things used to be that actually are quite fascinating when you find weird relics and remnants of them now. But it was this very modern thing when it started. And it was that era of turning the blog into a website, what have you. And it's founded by this man called Ben Clymer, who is really very obsessed with watches and loves them deeply and probably knows everything there is to know about vintage. And he really did push this vintage coverage, I think, that nobody was really doing at that time, 2010, in this very new, fresh way. And he has this really easy way of writing and explaining very complex things. And Hodinkee just took off and became this huge platform. It grew into e-commerce and it's lived in many various forms and mutations. But now in its current state, we are back to being editorial only. But it's the place to go if you want to read about watches. And if, anybody who knows even the smallest thing about the watch world will know that that's where you go to read about watch releases and watch culture and weird vintage stuff.
And catalyzed or went alongside the massive expansion of awareness for this peculiar little niche in the world, right? We saw that watches have always been a thing, but it became much more of a thing. And then that was tied with the pandemic and the collection of things and all of these things. But the watch as totemic collector's item.
Yeah. Listen, it's still very niche, right? It's becoming mainstream by way of celebrity wrist checking. But I think we got to be a little bit real and a little bit honest and self aware enough to say it's still a tiny little world.
But it was an even tinier and even nichier world 6 or 7 years ago, right?
100%.
So I'm just thinking about, all right, so we want Malaika here because we see that basically there's a bunch of nerdy men who are obsessing over the mechanical details of these things.
Yeah.
And there's obviously some germ there of somebody looking at this and going, it's actually more than that.
Yeah. Listen, it is more than that. And I've been through many emotional journeys in this stage of my career. And I could dissect them for you. I won't. But I'll give you the short story or the short version. I think going in, I was very much open to not making change, but shaking things up a little bit. I hate to use the word disruptor, but I imagine that that's why they hired me, right? And knowing Nick Marino, he's very, very clever. I think he wanted to push a little bit. And I'm known for maybe having some quite strong opinions in that world, which I think have softened over time. Or maybe I've just grown tired of getting the backlash, because that's something we'll come to. But in the beginning, I think I started out very opinionated. And then really the more I learned and the more relationships I made, the more visits to Switzerland I made, the more manufacturers I visited. I think the deeper I got into not the showy side of watches, but the very deep core watchmaking side, industry veterans, people who work at the bench in the manufacturer, I developed this very new, it was this huge amount of respect for these people that are really looking after this endangered craft, right? So then you build a little bit more nuance and you make sure that your arguments are well-rounded and that you know what you're talking about and you're reporting and you're speaking to a wide breadth of people. And so I think now I've gotten to this place where I've been working at Hodinkee for a while, and I think I've probably learned an immense amount that the opinions have softened a little bit.
Take us back to the bomb thrower era. Was it reactionary? Was it incendiary? Was it just naive?
Imagine being a woman who comes from fashion. I like to say I was raised in the circus. Because I was. And I came from this place where we were all yelling at each other all day long. And it was fine to yell and scream. And
over?
Yeah.
What were you yelling about?
A shoe, who knows?
Right.
Like, we need to get the heel of the Louboutin painted red before the Met Gala because it's not perfect enough. And having meltdowns over shoes stuck in customs, whatever. Going to the FedEx hub because somebody needed the right shoes for the Grammys, whatever. It was insane. Then you get to this place where things are a little bit more serious, and suddenly I'm surrounded by all these men who really take their hobby very seriously and who have a little, not everybody, but a lot of them have this very narrow view of what their hobby should be and who should be allowed inside their hobby. Very sanctimonious BS, if you ask me. Listen, I respect the hobby, but you should let other people into your hobby if they want to be a part of your hobby. So it was just these takes that I think people, just honestly being a woman with an opinion, it was not cool. And it was, Hodinkee's known for its comment section. Maybe that's calmed down a little bit, but there was a time where if you posted an article that not even, just maybe it was about style, or maybe it was about something that didn't have to do with whatever new caliber was put into the watch. It was like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Who is this? Bring us back to old Hodinkee. It was just mental, the reactions that people were having to like an article that was being served to them free.
What did they feel like they were protecting? There's a reason that people become gatekeepers, because they think that there is something that is destroying. This then goes into the politics of the world at the moment. What are we so afraid of?
Listen, it's so much easier to throw stones when, you aren't actually physically in the room with someone, right?
Thank you, Internet.
Yes. So it was just this new kind of, I felt so exposed in a way that I'd never felt before. And I was so used to my opinion being like cool and valued. And, I don't know, I'd been around all these other people that just had a very like-minded way of thinking. And all of a sudden I felt like I was being thrown into the ring. Obviously, there were lots of people who shared the same opinions as me, and I had a ton of support at work, outside of work, on social media. But there was just a lot of crazy backlash. And I really ultimately, like, the watch world is a very, very male dominated place. And it's definitely offering a certain type of man that is vocal, right? There are lots of different people who collect watches, but it seems to be this certain section of the internet who maybe aren't collectors, but maybe they're enthusiasts and they just make a lot of noise. But then after a while, you learn how to filter that out. And honestly, I think I learned from that.
And you start looking at this, you start writing about it.
Yeah.
And what are some of your, I don't know if hot takes is the right word, but your reactions to, you're looking at this obviously through a different lens,
Yeah.
and you are laying down a different canvas of, hey, I'm looking at this world and this is what I am seeing. What was the perspective?
I think my perspective was very much from this style angle, where I came in as this style editor, but just to underline the fact that I always did my research. And even if I was writing about how to style a particular watch, I always made sure I knew the history of that watch, even the base level knowledge about what movement was in the watch. If it was mechanical, maybe sometimes it was quartz, but I really did my reading because I work at Hodinkee. I got to get the facts right. But there were a lot of articles that were how to wear it. I would do this series and I would shoot these beautiful photos of models wearing watches and clothes, which did not.
I'm going to be a little bit pedantic for a second because maybe that's just my way of moving through the world. You use the word style as a noun and as a verb.
Yeah.
And I want to poke at that for a second to ask, what is style as a noun? And then the follow-up question is, what is style as a verb?
I mean, style as a noun, I think, is probably, there are probably a million definitions of style depending on who you talk to, right? I guess to me, it's kind of an icky word, actually, because what does it mean? And it makes everybody sound, I don't want to say arrogant or obnoxious, but I don't know. It's a weird word, right? What is each person's definition of style? Style is a verb, though. That's, to me, in my mind, styling as a stylist, picking the clothes, dressing the model, making sure the overall vision of the shoot makes sense. It's a very practical, physical thing.
You are hired as the style editor, and there is an idea that you are bringing some new perspective.
Yeah.
And obviously the desire is put this in a larger context, put this in a space that is something more than this is 256 moving parts that beat at 28,800, whatever.
Yeah.
Seems trying to expand the aperture for what these objects are.
For sure. Which, by the way, I think most humans who are interested in watches get into watches through style.
Correct.
Let's be clear. Looks do matter, right? So I can't even remember what your question was.
My question was basically that. I think that is what the object does.
Right.
And yet the people who are furthest down the rabbit hole felt some degree of opposition to, is that somehow minimizing that this is what this passion is about. It's not about clothes. Clothes are stupid.
Totally.
This is, right, clothes are stupid. The things women care about are stupid, right? All of these things are the subtext here.
Absolutely.
When it's all the same thing. This is why we are intrigued by them, I think.
I think so too. And to be honest, whatever watch you wear is a style statement, right? Whether or not you want it to be. Even if you're wearing an old beaten up, I don't know, Seiko, it's still a statement. I think actually, if you really want to be smart, you're observing all these things as a kind of anthropologist. And that's what I was always doing. Okay, how to wear it sounds maybe a little shallow, but I was always talking about clothes and watches. I tried to bring the cultural relevance of clothes and fashion up a notch to say, yeah, Vacheron's cool, but by the way, Kim Jones for Dior, this is why this is important. And it was putting everything on a level playing field, if that makes sense.
Do those things reflect one another? Does one follow one another? I mean, talk through that analogy in particular. How do you situate watch design in the world?
It's really hard, and it's a bit of a tricky stage right now, watch design, and especially when you put it side by side with fashion, because fashion...
Is design even the right word? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, to be honest, because in the way that fashion houses are run by a creative director, and obviously there are a million people working under that creative director, but the watch world, they usually design the movement first. So the movement is the little mechanism inside of the watch that powers the watch. That usually comes first, and then the watch case and design comes second, which if you think about is inherently a problem, right? If you're talking about a design object, whereas fashion, I guess you're not thinking about engineering. Well, you are thinking about the construction of the garment, but there's less to worry about in a way. So I think people are so wrapped up in this mechanical side of things, and not to start going on about manufacturing at scale, because that's quite boring, but there's lots of things to take into account when designing a watch. The length of time it takes, there are a million moving parts, and the market is very different. The consumer is very different. So I just think there's a lot less risk taking, right? Especially for those expensive but mid-tier. I'm not talking about the Patek Philippe's and the Langerns. I'm talking about Rolex, Omega, what have you. That sort of, it's not luxury, but in the mind of the consumer it is. Okay, because by the way,
it's really expensive.
Yeah, it's really,
you don't buy them very often.
It's really expensive, but to really like call a spade, a Rolex is not like a finished watch. Like really a luxury watch is either it's independently made by a smaller watchmaker, or it's a Patek Philippe or a Lange that's like hand finished, or an AP or whatever. So I would say that it's hard to do that middle ground of watch design and take risks. And there's really no figurehead at watch brands that are making creative decisions. It's all done behind closed doors. And there's just a lot less risk going. And the thing that watch brands tend to do is lean into their heritage, right? Which, by the way, I completely understand, because why do people buy watches? It's an anachronistic object. Why would you bother? I think it's what it represents. I think people wear it as a status symbol, but I also think it represents it's a connection to something very human and something very historical. And it's, like you said, it's a totem. So it's connected to this heritage, this idea of being historically, whatever, interesting. So then all these brands are kind of shackled to their heritage. So there's really very little movement forward in the way that there usually is in fashion. It's this weird stalemate that these brands find themselves in. How do we carry our tradition but modernize ourselves to the consumer, but the consumer wants the thing that reminds them of what this brand is? It's just very confusing and hard.
Tell me, as a consumer, how I think about buying a pair of shoes differently than buying a watch.
Well, a watch is not thought of as a disposable object, right? I would say that, yeah, you might be buying a very fancy pair of shoes, but I think deep down everybody knows you're buying a pair of shoes. One day those shoes are no longer going to be of use to you. A watch, I think most people purchase with the intent of keeping that thing forever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do I think about it differently as a result of that?
If you're buying something that's going to permanently exist in your collection of things, chances are you're probably going to go for something that's a little bit more classic, maybe a little bit more traditional. I think the reason why Cartier tanks and Rolex Submariners are so popular is because the design is just, again, hate this word, but it's timeless, right? And it's always going to be this classic thing.
Somehow feels platonic.
Exactly. It's almost a neutral, right? It's like a pair of jeans, like a Cartier tank or a Rolex Submariner or whatever, something of that ilk, even a Speedmaster. It is kind of like the watch equivalent of a pair of jeans. You're just going to be able to wear those things. They're never going to go out of style.
And in your mind, that is not fashion.
No.
And where does fashion start?
God, fashion is so big, though, isn't it, right? I miss that, by the way. I feel the scale of the fashion industry is so immense and the ideas are so big. And if you look at what's going on in fashion today, I think there's obviously this renewed energy and force that's coming in with this new guard of different designers at different houses. And it feels there's a lot of energy and movement. And it just feels so vast. And there are all these smaller designers, thanks to social media, people being able to sell their clothes without having to wholesale them. It's just so huge, and watches are still relatively small.
You said somewhere that it's all identity politics.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's how
the clothes we wear are expressions of ourselves. Do you think that's right?
Yeah. Whether you're trying to express who you truly are or who you want to be, I mean, it's what you're putting out into the world, right?
And watches are different, or because of this durability, never have the chance to say much of expressive value?
What I've started to come to terms with, I feel like watches are the flexiest object you could own. And I even think that watches are more of a flex than women buy insane Cleef high jewelry, right? Because it's this thing of, I'm going to buy this watch. And most of the time, when you're buying a watch that's a Rolex or Patek or AP or whatever, you want people to know that your watch is a Rolex or an AP. You desperately want people to know. And that's why you're buying the Submariner and the Royal Oak, by the way. Probably not because you think it's this classic, amazing design. It's because you know that you're going to wear that watch and people are going to know what you're wearing. So it's very tied up in this status signaling. It's the most outwardly obvious, I think, you can be next to logos, right? It's watches are jewelry with logos. That's period.
I read an article once where someone said that watches have a functional alibi. And so you can pull up to a table and roll your sleeve up and show whatever you want in a way that you can't throw your Ferrari or Porsche keys down on the table without looking a
douchebag.
Right.
Yeah. But you can kind of look like a douchebag rocking up.
You know what the motion is,
We've seen it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And yet, these things do, maybe for that reason, that's why people become very protective of them. Is there something I'm afraid that I'm going to be exposed?
Say more from a collector standpoint.
I'm just sort of exploring this idea that I don't want you shining a light on what's going on here because that makes me nervous.
Right. Listen, I would say that the real collectors, the real ballers out here, the ones that aren't sort of involved in the dealing and the public side of it, they're usually very private people who keep their watches locked up wherever they want to keep them locked up. And it's a private thing. I've heard some crazy stories. My boyfriend is actually a specialist in the watch department at Sotheby's.
Really can't escape.
Yeah, I really can't. I can't believe it. Every time I say that, I chuckle because I just would not have believed you 5 years ago. But whatever, we talk about Patek at bedtime.
Everybody's got their pillow talk.
The stories you hear about insane collectors with insane, like, stuff, just numbers as well that, like, most people couldn't even dream of or imagine. Or I think people are very, very private often about what they own.
And that is a completely different motion than I don't know, I saw some video the other day of like DJ Khaled, who every time it pops up seems to be like getting some new, that's a different form of expression. I mean, I guess that's the like cribification of.
God, I love cribs, yeah.
But right, like that's a different thing. I am building a house because I want cribs to come, because I want Architectural Digest to come, is different than I'm building a house that I want to live in and I want my friends to come over and watch the Super Bowl.
And by the way, make no mistake, I can sit here and talk about what's tacky in a watch setting or whatever. I can put my little Jane Goodall lens on things, and observe the primates at play. But I love watches. I love them as objects. I love them as little totems of history and provenance. I think they're just the most amazing way to mark a milestone in life. The best gifts I've ever given are watches. Like, I truly love watches. But there are just different kinds of collectors in the world, and some are more discreet than others, and some, I think, how do I say this correctly? I think sometimes they were saying the watch is just more about the flex culture than the watch itself, right? And then you start to think of brands, Richard Mille, which can be very divisive, which I actually personally love, Richard Mille. But that's a good example of
the flex just leaning into being the flex.
Yeah, and by the way, I think they are 10 out of 10 A+, so savvy at marketing, and they know exactly what they're doing. And it's a smaller family-run business, so they have control over what they're doing, and it's very intelligent. But that's flex.
So, Dr. Goodall, while we're trampling through the Anthropocene here, tell us about the eras that you have seen of watches. Where are we now, and what are some of the other periods of time that are reflective of particular pieces?
Where we are now from a consumer standpoint is so different to where we are now on like watch internet. So I would say that...
Tell us about both, and I'm curious to understand why those are different.
Watch internet is this funny little place where watch enthusiasts gather, meaning Instagram. You know, a lot of people are in WhatsApp groups. It's very nerdy stuff. But watch internet is this place where a lot of vintage lovers are, independent brand lovers are. It's this very specific microcosm of watch loving that's, we need to bring back design from the 70s because it's so cool and original. And a lot of it is, but it's an echo chamber of small watches for men. And I don't know, design-led watches are the next big thing. It's okay. Then you have the consumer who are mostly buying sport watches, Rolex, Omega, Patek, Nautilus, if they can get one. They're usually buying something that's a little bit bigger because guess what? If your watch is bigger in diameter, chances are more people are going to see it.
If the goal is to put your arm up and have a blinking light.
Yes, exactly. But on the watch
internet... That's why Panerai was so successful.
So successful. And by the way, that era of watchmaking is probably my favorite from my Dr. Goodall chat. This
is early 2000s we're talking now?
Early 2000s, Panerai, Jacob 5 Time Zone, if you want to call that a watch. It is a watch, but that's a longer story. AP Offshore, Hublot, Big Bang. That to me is the most fascinating time because it was socially the time where watches were no longer these grandpa objects. They became this real status signal, and it was less about what your watch was inside and more about how your watch reflected who you were and what your station was in society. And by the way, it was the era of luminous Dom bottles at the club. Of course, the watches were big and crazy. People had like cars and were wearing Murakami Vuitton bags. It was crazy, but what a time.
It went from a discreet item, a Swiss banker wearing a Calatrava,
chic,
right?
Yeah.
In a bespoke suit
Yes.
to, I don't know, Schwarzenegger
Yes.
and offshore racing. And
Absolutely. I think that what people often miss about watches is even though they are these old-timey objects, if you really break them down, they are reflections of the culture that we're living in. And the 2000s watches are so interesting because you're coming off the back of the naughty 90s and everything is oversized and big and grungy and oversized flannels and jeans and everything's extreme. X Games, all this culture was big and just extreme. Tattoos, barbed wire tattoos. It was just a time of extreme. So of course it was the birth time for, I think it was 93, the offshore was born. It makes a lot of sense, right? When you look at the context of when watches are created, still to this day, it's always a reflection of what's happening in society. Maybe it's a little bit slower than fashion, but usually, if you look back, and then it's also a pendulum swing, right? Because everybody's going on about small watches, but this is not the first time that small watches are back, let's say. It's just a pendulum swing, and watches do.
watch sizes are like hemlines. They just sort of yo-yo
Yeah,
as.
I mean, I know that sounds kind of like a cliche, but it's true, right? It is. Watch diameters are like, they just yo-yo.
So we go from that to, does the world change in 2008 as things blow up, or what is the next epic here?
Yes, global financial crisis, big watches, then turns into, I mean, I think
The mortgage brokers with their 47 millimeter watches blew up the world.
basically, yeah.
Yes.
They hit destruct on that offshore or whatever.
And they were saved by the dome crystal, and the rest of us were up the creek.
Absolutely. They're wearing AP concepts. I really think that the watch craze came from, I mean, everybody talks about this, but the fact that Paul Newman's Daytona sold for $17 million in 2017, I want to say it was. I think like headlines like that just bring people back in. And then obviously COVID came about. Then people really did tap in that bubble of crypto bros buying whatever Patek AP they can sort of get their hands on. But I think today, the reflection of what's happened, I would like to say that in the way that athleisure is pervasive, get away from it. And we will soon, I don't know, but everybody's trotting a la yoga leggings. I just feel the same way about sport watches. I think it goes hand.
You talk about the rise, I don't know, it probably started before the crypto bros, but
Yeah.
this recognition that these could be objects of speculation.
Yeah.
I was going to say investment, but investment is different than
Yeah.
speculation.
Yeah.
But my sense is that they were sold for a long time as an investment, but it
Yeah.
was more of an emotional investment.
Yeah.
This idea of you never actually own it, you hold on to it to the next generation, was
Right.
basically just a way to charge more for something.
Yeah. Marketing.
But there were not really liquid markets for anything. Maybe there was for a Submariner or a Daytona.
Yeah.
But the financialization of this and people thinking about, I want to buy something because it's going to appreciate,
Yeah.
is different than what was happening 15 or 20 years ago, I think.
Well, I mean, let's go back to those collectors with hordes of things saved in vaults, put away and kept in their plastic. Those are assets appreciated. Well, I would hope that they're appreciated. Look at the Jean market. It's insane. I don't know if people are familiar with FP Jean. It's an independent watch brand. And this man, Francois Paul Jean, is top of the top, highly esteemed watchmaker, but his watches in the past few years have just appreciated so much in value that actually it's kind of scary and it's like derailing, right? And at what point do you stop? At what point does it become not acceptable anymore? And it's all very inflated, and actually that's not a good thing.
I'm fascinated by this idea that over time people coalesce around the same things. And I have thought for a long time that there is going to be a move toward more diversity of expression and
Yes.
consumption. It's one of the reasons why I started at Present, was this belief that people wanted something else.
Yes.
And they wanted something where people were going to lean in and say, oh, wow, tell me about your ring.
Yeah.
Rather than, oh, wait, okay, I can see that your watch is, and I know exactly how much it is. But so far, I'm not sure that that has happened. Everybody wants a Nautilus, and everybody wants a Royal Oak, and everybody wants a Daytona.
Yeah.
And then here are all kinds of other things that are objectively extraordinary watches that sell for pennies on the dollar because those didn't get the Klieg light of attention.
I think it's always really important to separate this I don't want to call it consumption, but the everyday consumer, even if it's the upper echelon buying tech and AP. I think it's important to separate that watch consumer from the die-hard watch enthusiasts, because they are peddling a different thing in the way that, like, you know, AP in enthusiast circles right now, cooked. In a mass... Because they're catering no longer to that very niche audience. Like, AP have become quite divisive in the way that they're trying to talk to a younger demographic. They're trying to go for this plurality of thought and marketing, and they're just trying to broaden horizons, right?
And they're not selling minute repeaters to the same people who already have 718 of them? Is that what their crime is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm a big supporter of AP Vocal. I work with them a lot. But that's the prime example of enthusiasts being pissed that watch brand is not going along the lines of the traditional playbook. But why can't we have brands that cater to a mass younger generation and then also cater to the old heads who want the piece unique minute repeater or whatever pocket watch that just came out? There's got to be plurality.
Otherwise, and what is the objection? I can't believe they did this thing with Carolina Bucci. What did they do to this icon?
Well, listen, when they did that collaboration with Travis Scott, and I wrote a very long article about it, I think it was a very interesting, heated moment for me. They were up in arms. The watch world was just, what the hell is this? Who the hell is this? Why on earth would you do this? And in my mind, I'm like, it's Travis Scott. He's like one of the most famous people in the world. This brand is just expanding their audience, and they're doing the classic Porsche playbook of, hey, young person, here's this cool item that maybe you can't afford now, but it's visible to you by way of Travis Scott, and maybe in 25 years when you can afford it, you'll remember us, right? Why is that so offensive? Because it's a rapper maybe is a little bit of an alien person in the hardcore enthusiast world. It just really threw me through this very weird existential crisis moment, and I think it was actually an important turning point for me, because I really saw things for what they were, as bleak as that sounds.
And your response was, this is a good thing? This is something that we need to understand? What was
my response was, yeah, I try to be as polite and eloquent as possible, but I wrote this very long think piece that was like, hey, guys, this is ultimately veiled prejudice. I'm calling you out. And so what if you don't like it? Did you all of the other offshore? I mean, this wasn't an offshore, but did you the hundreds of offshores that came out in the 2000s? Have you liked every single AAP release that ever was? It's just not for you. Let's just move on.
Are there enthusiast communities in other spaces that are this vocal? This is the one that I know the most, but do people get up in arms when Prada introduces a shoe that they think is an abomination?
Listen, I like to think I'm a pretty diehard Prada fan. I've never experienced sort of that kind of vitriol. I do know that people get upset, and I've certainly been upset at particular collections, whether it be like, what is Raf doing at Prada, or who is this designer at this house, you know, ruining whoever's legacy. But I don't know if it's so violent listen, I'm sure there are plenty of like sneakerhead, spaces where maybe it is. But I just think by nature of having a very, very expensive thing dissected and analyzed, you're going to have like weird opinions.
And to the point of it's a narrow market, there are not that many people buying these things.
Right. And by the way, most of the people commenting are not buying these things.
Well, that's an interesting thing. You had said that earlier, that there's a difference between the collectors and the enthusiasts. Mm-hmm. So these are just, people taking pot shots from the cheap seats?
I mean, this is like a weird and awkward one, but yeah, like how many people can afford to have a collection of very expensive watches? It's really for a small minority of people. I think we are desensitized, right? Because we're around it so much. We work in these industries. We forget that this is not the norm. Not everybody is dropping 50 grand on a watch like it's, just a normal Tuesday. We're desensitized, but we have to remember that there's just such a small number of people who are actually consuming and buying these things at a high level. Obviously, again, back to the Rolex and even if you go down a little bit to a Longines or an Omega or whatever.
The ability for somebody to pay thousands of dollars is very narrow.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And we can't forget that.
While we are on the subject of anachronisms, I want to talk about print magazines.
Oh, yeah, my favorite subject.
Because it's really kind of interesting that a platform that cuts its teeth in the digital realm, that millions of people have access to for free, for better or worse, decides we are going to invest a tremendous amount of time and capital in putting together a print publication. Tell us why.
Yeah, it's always so fun for me to talk about the magazine because Hodinkee is digital first, right? But I come from a very print-heavy background, working in fashion, always doing shoots for magazines, working at interviews. Print to me it's god-tier work. So I love everything about it. In this attention span economy, it may seem like a weird thing to do, but I think people are so hungry for something that feels a little bit more considered, something that you can touch, something that you can digest, maybe in a more meaningful way. I also believe that there's this idea of permanence that comes with print. You're really thorough about what you're putting in your magazine. You're obviously editing rigorously. You're reading text over and over, fact-checking, copy editing. You're making sure that what you put in there is 10 out of 10, no mistakes. Well, you'd hope for no mistakes, but they do happen. Your really bulletproof content is going in the magazine. Whereas online is fast, it's quick. You don't have all the time in the world to sit there and write out your opinions.
If you make a mistake, you change it.
Yeah.
You fix it. Okay.
It's not permanent. And so I also just am in this interesting place where I also see brands heavily investing in print, but specifically independent print media. I'm not going to comment on the Condés and Hearsts. I think that's like a different thing. But certainly independent publishing and media is having this renaissance because it's also, especially when it's a niche topic, watches or whatever niche subject the magazine is serving. I think there's a real desire for this sense of community and belonging. You can buy this little thing maybe at $20, $30, but you have this object and it's your way in. It's just a pleasant experience.
It's a club card?
It's a club card, yeah. But it's usually a beautiful one and it feels nourishing as opposed to reading on the internet that can sometimes just feel like you're sort of self-destructing and melting your own brain.
And how do you think about it editorially? Are there things that go into the book that wouldn't go on the site and vice versa?
Absolutely. I am sort of a visual first person, though I am a writer as well. Like to think of the magazine as this place where we can experiment a little bit more visually because we have the time to, And I think the photography in our magazine is just a different beast. Approach it completely differently to the way that the edit team does on the site, purely because we have more resources for the book, because you're only making 2 books a year. You're not, it's a different thing, right? You are also just, you're a little bit more considered in your choices, and you can't be sitting here doing full-blown shoots for every online article you're writing. So it's also, I'm just trying to create a fantasy and a way to read about your cool hobby and escape at the same time. And maybe you want to just let go and read about your weird thing.
Did it make sense when the first one came out? Did people know what to do with it?
Hodinkee magazine has actually been going since 2016. And I think it's gone through a few different changes. But I think now we're making a little bit more noise about its current form because we're very proud of it. I'm very proud of it. I think the team is. It's the place where the Hodinkee edit team get to do the most thorough, deep, intentional work. And it's just something that we're very keen to share. And I think, just by nature of me and my personality, I want people to give us their best opinions and dig up the weirdest stuff for the book. But yes, no, I don't think we'd always be putting that stuff online.
And what is success? Is success circulation? Is success bringing new people into the brand universe? Is it driving sales of Submariners? What is?
I think success is not just circulation, but I don't know, opening up people's minds and changing the way that maybe watches. Listen, I love accessories, okay? And I think that watches are accessories. And what's missing in the watch world, I think, is this way to contextualize watches as accessories, not just these very academic objects. We do both, by the way. In the last issue of the magazine, to be clear, there is an entire article on hallmarks. There is an entire article on watchmaking at La Fabrique du Temps. Don't get it twisted.
You want to go deep. We got deep.
It's very watchy, but it gives you visually this new context. I think that my main goal at Hodinkee was always, and from day one until today, I will always push, but I will always respect the reader and the enthusiast. And I will always make sure that something that might be a bit radical is supported by its academic foundation, because that is Hodinkee, right?
What do you think about the role of commentary and criticism in this, I'm not even sure what technological realm that we are living in, and the ability to generate endless content instantaneously?
The role of just constant content or people having
kind of
opinions?
That you do, right?
Yeah.
You are someone who is taking a stance on a particular subject that is informed by a tremendous amount of knowledge and expertise and learning.
But everybody thinks they know more than me, kind of.
Well, or I can ask my chat bot, create an article about my sock in the voice of Malaika Crawford.
I have tried to do that, by the way, and it doesn't really work. I was speaking to my friend Tom Bettridge, and we were actually on a panel together, and I did try to write my letter from the editor just to see what it would be in ChatGPT, and we were like, it's terrible. It hasn't caught up to being able to speak in the way that a writer can on paper. It's not there yet. And also, I want to read what another human has written. I want to be informed by other humans, not by machines. And I think we're always going to want that, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the more we are deluged by information, the more trusted information is valuable. I'm taking a trip to Japan at the end of this week, and I can get all of the information that I want from every source. And if you tell me, hey, there was this restaurant that I went to, I am going to prioritize that far more than whatever gets spit out of whatever algorithm.
But that comes back to my point about the magazine, right? When you pick up a magazine, no matter what it is, whether it's New York Magazine, The New Yorker, whether you're reading Hodinkee, whether you're reading ID, whatever you're reading, that such a huge amount of human effort went into that book that you're going to trust it way more than anything else you're reading online or in Chat GPT, right? It's, yeah, what you just said, that human sign off behind it.
And it just feels more evocative. And maybe that's what leads to the trust. You had to commit to something to put it in the magazine.
Yeah.
Which means you had to believe it, which means that there were other things that could have been there.
Yeah.
I think that structure and limits tell you some things matter and some things don't. And I think that's really important.
100%. If you have boundaries and limits, then you're not going to just put a bunch of whatever in there. You're going to think really hard about it. I mean, I would hope that you think really hard about what you put in your magazine.
So you have now spent the better part of a decade in this Watts world.
Yeah.
Okay, you've spent a week and a half. I don't want to, send you down too much of an existential spiral here.
Yeah.
After getting into it, what was the first watch you bought for yourself?
Oh my God. Okay. Actually, yeah. No, I was about to tell you that I couldn't remember. That's not true. The first watch that I bought for myself was a yellow gold reverso on a bracelet. And that might have been a little bit after I started at Hodinkee. And I love the reverso. I love that watch. The thing is with buying watches, and especially us living in a watchy household with somebody who's constantly buying and selling, that's what you have to remember. Like, people who are deeply into this, they sell all the time. You cannot buy at that rate and hold on to it all. And what I've come to learn is that you can buy things, let them go, and it's okay. And that's kind of the beauty of like vintage watches, that there's this, you do have that in fashion to some degree, but maybe not as, I don't know, it's a whole different thing, right? Shoes and bags, depending on what they are, usually depreciate in value, whereas watches, for the most part, would retain their value. So it's this nice, comforting thing of, oh, I can buy this watch, but maybe if I don't want it 3 years later, it's okay, I'll let it go and something else will come back in.
What is the most meaningful piece you've bought?
The most meaningful...
Or received?
Actually, I'm wearing it right now. It's a mini tank from the 70s. It's Cartier Paris. It's very rare, and my boyfriend gave it to me for my birthday. And I will probably have this watch forever. And I wear it... I have a lot of watches, let's be honest.
Occupational.
Yeah. I wear it pretty much every day, just because of what it means to me. And when I look at it, I think of him, and it was a very special gift. And I think that's why watches are so epic.
Tell us about the rest of the stylist's style. What else do you like to bring into your life?
I was thinking about this today, anticipating that you might ask me a question like this, and where does my taste come from? What's informed my taste? I have this very eccentric French grandmother who is always decked out, fully decked out in jewels, and she's got arms just full of bangles and rings, and she's lives in this flat and that's just full to the brim of objects and rug books, and she's just a crazy person. So I think that was foundational for me, and I love stuff.
Yeah.
And I can't get enough of stuff. And I've always been really attracted to that very bohemian, undone look that I guess is in, but that, I guess in the 2000s, you're thinking about when I was a teenager and it was very bohemian Kabbalah, reading Hideous Kinky, being into Moroccan interior design. I don't think that's left me.
Yeah. Those formative experiences never do.
And I'm obsessed with costume jewelry. Can't get enough. Will throw down serious money on vintage YSL earrings that are probably immaterially worth nothing, but get me a brass earring with a tassel on it. Loved. I'm very more is more. I love a Lily de la Falaise look. Like, absolutely adore jewelry in all of its forms. That's my other kind of love after watches. I just love accessory. Yeah.
You're in the right place.
Yeah.
Are there 3 designers, artists, brands, people you think are doing extraordinary things that deserve more attention?
Yes. Well, I don't know if they already have a considerable amount of attention, I would say, in their own little pockets, but um, I work with this genius called Michael Friedman, who was the head of complications at AP, and he's actually been name checked in a Kendrick Lamar song.
As are most watchmakers.
Yeah. Like he himself, not AP, which is insane, by the way. But this man is really like being a mentor to me, and he's starting his own watch brand called Pattern Recognition, and it's very trippy philosophical stuff. His whole idea is making a watch that represents past, future, and present. It's thinking about the watch as a vestige of time, but it's just very heady stuff, and it's very mechanically dense. And he is just one of the industry's greatest minds, and he is a savant. I think everybody should read about him and his work, and even if you're nowhere, I mean, those watches are they're pricey. I would use.
They are in the world now?
They're not yet in the world, but I think many pre-orders have been taken. When you talk about small independent brands that are charging serious money for very serious watches,
Give us an order of magnitude for something like this.
they're usually produced in small batches, right? So it's a brand. This will maybe do like 20 watches of one model.
And they're 6 figures a piece?
We're talking at least 6 figures.
Yeah.
Like, and the watches are extremely well made and very complex.
Yeah.
I would say that something I've learned from my journey in watches and looking at these $200,000 objects is that you don't have to buy one to participate in the beauty of them and what they mean and what they stand for. And Michael Friedman is one of these people that you just want to go to him and sit there and listen. And like, how magical is that? And he can make the most complicated idea or theory just into the plainest English. And like, that to me is just a true work of genius. So love him, love his brand. It's epic. I think people should pay attention to it. He's going to do great things. Then another friend of mine, because I guess this is shout out hour, is Sarah Narici, who has a brand called Dine, jewelry brand, who I also work with her on certain projects. She is Italian, English, living in New York, supremely talented, trained at St. Martin's, makes this otherworldly jewelry with just, she really approaches her jewelry making as an artist would their object or whatever their medium is. She's very intentional and thoughtful, and it's just so non-conformist. And she has had such a surge in bespoke commissions for engagement rings because they look like nothing you've ever seen before. And her clever thing is just making sure that the jewelry she makes is a reflection today. And I think I'm very drawn to people that are sort of pushing out modern ideas, because I love vintage, but from a new brand, I want a new idea, right? Let's push the conversation forward. And she's just so good at taking these weird, abstract ideas and references and making them reflect our world today. I just, making modern high jewelry is really hard, and she does a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, I'm just going to say like print in general.
Shout out to print.
Shout out to print in general.
What other books do you admire? Who's doing cool stuff now?
I just feel like there is this insane surge in interior design publications. Like, people are obsessed with interior stuff. I mean, I'm obsessed. I don't know if you are, but
I'm trying to become
I
obsessed.
can't get enough.
Yeah.
By the way, I wish I was that chic person that could name every single piece of furniture that ever was, and I'm trying to get there. But even World of Interiors, that's this UK publication, they are doing some insane covers for mass media. Then there's Neptune papers that I'm really into. There's this amazing Australian book that I need to remember the name of that's apartamento vibes, but it's a newer. I need to find you. You need to follow this. It's called. It'll come up because I really do believe that print is having a comeback, and maybe it's not fashion, by the way. Right? It's called Never Too Small. Do you know that?
No.
Obsessed with Never Too Small. It's just, I think people are really leaning into subjects that aren't fashion in print, and that's cool. And I'm here for it. And stay tuned.
The next issue of Hodinkee magazine will be available
May 15th, if I make it in time.
The countdown is on. Nothing like a deadline to
Yes.
get everything done. Available on hodinkee.com, available in the finer magazine stores.
Exactly.
Certainly in New York. I saw it once in LA.
Okay, good. Oh, good. I'm glad. Available in some smaller independent retailers too. We are getting the circulation out there, so you should see it pop up in more stores. We're starting to distribute in Europe as well, so that's exciting.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank
Keep up the good work. Thank you for telling the good stories, fighting the good fight, and grounding us all in the physical and in the material.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
Malaika Crawford, a pleasure. That's it for this episode of The Materialist. If you like what you heard, please like, rate, and subscribe to The Materialist wherever you get your podcasts. The Materialist is a presentation of At Present, Matchmaker to Extraordinary Jewelry. We'll see you next time.